All right. I am assuming I'm assuming that we're all live now. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Yay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Oh my goodness. Half an hour after the planned start time. I really do apologize. I've been kind of frantically working on this all day, but anyway, yes, hello everyone, and welcome to the first installment of the Learn About Limerence webinar series. This webinar is titled What is Limerence? And thank you all very much for your interest in this topic. My name is Rachel Wood, and I'm the founder of a ministry organization in development called Lord Over Limerence. I'm also a limerence survivor, which is why this topic is so close to my heart. Some other key things to know about me are that I'm an electrical engineer, singer-songwriter, and I try to spread a little joy and peace wherever I go. So here's the agenda for the presentation today. First, I'll start with a brief overview of Lord Over Limerence as an organization. Then I'll go over several definitions of limerence, some of the available statistics and demographics, common characteristics of limerence, and finally share about my own real-life limerence experience. So to start, I'd like to give just a brief overview of Lord Over Limerence as a nonprofit organization in development. At Lord Over Limerence, our mission is to help those who are impacted by limerence find peace, healing, freedom, and sufficiency in Christ. Similarly, our vision is to help every individual and family who is impacted by limerence find uplifting community, complete healing, and lasting peace in Christ. There are some key ministry elements we employ to carry out this mission and vision. Specifically, we have a private support group on Facebook where limerence struggles can be shared and others can respond with prayer and words of encouragement. Within the Facebook group, we have held Bible studies on the armor of God and 2 Corinthians, with more to come in future months. Currently, we have a relatively small community of about 40 members, but this number has been growing steadily over the past couple of years since it was created. Also, we have a blog on the website to post short articles that are written to help limerence experiences choose hope and to strengthen their hearts to persevere through the daily battle that limerence presents. Later this year, we're planning to launch a gift box ministry to offer more tangible support to sufferers and survivors of limerence. The boxes will contain Bibles, journals, a stuffed cuddle animal, scripture bookmarks, hopeful, strength-giving music, personal care items such as lip balm, soap, and lotion, comfort items such as candles and tea, biblically based books on aspects of the limerence experience, and a Lord Over Limerence brochure. As you're aware, if you're watching this, whether during the live session or on demand, we are holding a 4-part tri-weekly webinar series to help raise awareness about limerence. This first one, What is Limerence, is being recorded on April 29th. Part 2, What is the difference between limerence and similar experiences, will be broadcast live on May 20th. Part 3, What causes limerence, is scheduled for June 10th. And finally, Part 4, How can I help someone who is experiencing limerence, will be on July 1st. In future months, I'd like to share about the organization at local community resource fairs and participate in Christian conferences. This will help to continue to grow our community, improve upon our existing ministries, and add to them as the Spirit leads. If you're interested in helping Lord Over Limerence in any way, we do have several volunteer opportunities available. To make the most of our time, I won't go over all of them in this webinar, but you can find details at the link shown at the bottom of this slide. Now, let's get into some definitions of limerence. In a few words, to introduce the topic, I normally describe it to people as extreme romantic obsession. But of course, there's a lot more to it. So let's start with the origin of the term limerence. Author and psychologist Dorothy Tenoff coined the term limerence in the year 1979 to describe the unique experience of hundreds of her clients. She wrote about it at length in her book Love and Limerence. I've only read part of the book, but from what I have read of her descriptions of her clients' experiences, I felt even more sure that limerence was what I had experienced as well. Here's a quote from the book, which I found from themarginalian.org. People have been trying to control limerence without much success for as far back as records go. But it is remarkably tenacious, involuntary, and resistant to external influence once it takes hold. Limerence is unaffected by the intensity of our desire to call it into or out of existence at our wills. It can override self-welfare, and its power over life seems neither diminished with age nor less for one sex than for the other. I've come to agree that it's totally involuntary, but it certainly is resistant to external influence. Willpower alone is not sufficient to break free from it because it requires a tremendous amount of unrelenting strength not to fall back into it. It's really like an addiction in that way. A single moment of weakness can result in the limerence becoming stronger than it was before. From the medical and psychological community, we find some noteworthy definitions from Psychology Today and Medical News Today. Psychology Today calls limerence a state of involuntary obsession with another person. It is based on the uncertainty that the person you desire, called the limerent object in the literature, also desires you. Since limerence is the desire to be desired, it is a cognitive as well as physical and emotional experience. As the focus of limerence is whether or not the object of desire reciprocates the feelings, rather than actually falling in love with the person, it is almost always one-sided. Medical News Today says this: limerence occurs when a person develops an obsessive attachment to someone. It may feel like a very intense form of being in love that may also feel irrational, intrusive, and involuntary. The more unclear the LO's feelings are, the more intense the thoughts of someone with limerence may be about them. A person who experiences limerence may obsess about their LO so much that it affects their productivity and daily functioning. Both of these definitions emphasize that limerence exists only with uncertainty about how the limerent person's object of affection feels about him or her. It is the hope of reciprocation that keeps limerence going, and indeed, the less clear the LO's true feelings, the more intense the limerence becomes. This next definition is from Wikipedia. Limerence is a state of mind which results from romantic feelings for another person and typically includes intrusive, melancholic thoughts or tragic concerns for the object of one's affection, as well as a desire to form or maintain a relationship with the object of love and to have one's feelings reciprocated. I found this definition unique because it is the only one I encountered that refers to melancholic thoughts and tragic concerns. In my experience, it is true, though. While the main indicator of limerence is the obsessiveness, there is often deep rumination that even I considered melancholic. In one song, I wrote about my melancholy smile, hinting at my true feelings even while I tried to hide them from everyone. As for tragic concerns, in another song, I wrote about it being tragic that we were not together, and never would be. Yet I would remember him fondly forever nonetheless. Those songs came from a very somber outlook on life that resulted from being denied the one thing I desired most, the love of the one I loved. The secular support community has some definitions of its own. I'll highlight just two of them from limerence.net and livingwithlimerence.com. Limerence.net says limerence is love addiction on steroids, a combination of love addiction, traits of OCD, and an addictive personality sets us up for enduring limerence. This definition links limerence to other psychological disorders and susceptibility to addiction. Having a history of other obsessions and feeling addicted while in limerence myself, I can agree with the connection to addiction. Livingwithlimerence.com defines limerence as a mental state of profound romantic infatuation, characterized by an initial period of elation and intense emotional arousal that can progress to an involuntary obsessive craving for another person. Here, I note the acknowledgement that limerence is the result of a typical progression of events. It starts with the moment one begins to see the potential to fulfill hopes and dreams by being in a romantic relationship with a certain person. And that moment is known as the glimmer by many in the limerence support community. Then it grows into obsessive efforts to obtain reciprocation. By now you probably understand the main ideas about how limerence is defined. However, since I'm coming from a Christian perspective, I would like to offer one more definition using biblical terms. So, limerence is a form of idolatry in which reciprocated romantic affection from a specific person is coveted more highly than anything else. The affected individual finds thoughts of the person extremely difficult to take captive, and over time often feels anxious and desperate enough to become willing to sin to secure reciprocation. Now, I understand the words idolatry, covet, and sin are fairly strong, but the longer it's been since I became free from limerence, the more I realize those words are true of the experience. It's not an unavoidable psychological condition or an involuntary obsession, but rather a conscious choice to adore and pursue a relationship with a certain person more than God. This is dangerous, and if left unchecked, it very well could lead to loss of life, as I'll explain more when we get to my story. Regarding statistics and demographics, I must first state that there is a great deal of study that still needs to be done on this subject. Limerence, like any deep human experience, is complex, and only in the past few decades has it begun to receive the attention it requires. Here, we'll look at a few of the most common questions about limerence statistics, but many questions remain. The first question is, who is affected by limerence? Limerence affects the general population in a wide age range, essentially at any point in one's entire lifespan. It can start at a very early age, such as 5 or 6 years old, or take a person by surprise in middle age and beyond. It also is experienced by both men and women, either introverts or extroverts, individuals with any sexual orientation, and throughout the world. Although most of the online support community tends to be from North America and the United Kingdom, there is representation from Africa and Asia as well. The next question is, how common is limerence? Tenov did not specify an estimate for percentage of the population, but rather divided the population into two types of individuals who are either limerent or non-limerent. A more recent study by Albert Waken and Duyen Vo estimated 5%, based on the number of people studied who experienced psychological distress as a result of their limerence. Similarly, a separate study by Neurosparkle, based on the MTBI personality type manual's records of the percentage of the population that has each of the 16 personality types, estimated 4.3%. Dr. L from livingwithlimerence.com decided conduct his own simple 5-question survey and concluded that roughly 50% of the population may experience limerence at some point in his or her life. I've noted the 5 key factors on which he focused his questions and included the link to more details about the survey and the results. Personally, and to be clear, this is mostly based on my own intuition rather than scientific data at this point. I believe the total percentage is probably closer to 20 to 25%, and the subset that experienced debilitation in limerence would be about 10% of the population. Another question you might have is, how long does limerence last? The duration varies widely from anywhere between a few weeks to multiple decades. However, the average duration is 1 to 3 years. In my personal experience with limerence, the episodes lasted 3 or 4 months at the shortest to 3 or 4 years at the longest. How long limerence lasts, though, is highly dependent upon perception of the limerence experiencer's interactions with the LO. As seen in the definitions, the level of uncertainty is a key factor in the intensity of limerence, and of course, the more intense it becomes, the longer it takes to recover from it. Many questions remain as limerence continues to be studied by researchers. Some of the questions I have are, what age range is most common? Why does limerence seem to be more prevalent in North America and Europe than in other regions of the world? How do trauma and insecure attachment styles factor into the likelihood of limerence manifesting in a person's life? How does religion or spirituality affect an individual's experience of limerence? I'll touch on some of these questions in the remaining 3 parts of this webinar series, but I can't promise to answer them thoroughly since there is so much more study to be done. For now, I can let you know that in 2023, the University of Sussex performed a detailed survey to better understand how limerence affects the respondents' relationships and daily lives. The report is not yet ready for publication, but I have been told they may publish the results in the summer of 2024. I'm certain that they will share some key insights not previously widely known, and I think it's safe to assume they still have several questions that will require more research. Again, it's a complex topic with lots to learn and discuss. Now, let's consider some of the most common characteristics of limerence. You can tell someone might be in limerence if they exhibit the following behaviors. Obsessive thoughts that are difficult to control probably is number 1 on the list. For someone in limerence, the person from whom they long for reciprocation is always on their minds. It can be very difficult to concentrate on anything else because the felt need to be in a closer relationship with that person dominates their attention. Daydreaming and fantasy are also very common because the thought of fulfilling the fantasies of being together brings hope and motivation to keep going with other activities of life. Anxiety is another major part of daily life for many limerents. Whenever it feels like their feelings are returned, they feel the happiest they've ever been. But when they feel in danger of losing reciprocation, there's little peace. Hence, it's like a roller coaster of emotion between absolute euphoria when they think they are loved in return and complete devastation when they feel rejected. Another thing to notice is that people in limerence will often ignore red flags about their limerence objects. If they have a history of bad breakups or a problem with alcoholism, for example, a limerent person will pay that no mind. Character flaws are of no consequence if the limerence object only returns their affection. On a physical level, a limerent person may experience disruption in sleep habits, either sleeping less or more, or at different abnormal times during the day, rapid heart rate, excessive perspiration, and butterflies in the stomach. nervousness around their LO. Spiritually, there may be inner conflict that might be best described as heart against mind. They know in their minds that they need to move on because of the distress and desperation they feel in the midst of one-sided affection. But in their hearts, they feel like the other person is all they need to be happy. Now, here's where this presentation gets especially personal for me. I'll share a somewhat abbreviated version of my own story of limerence, and I apologize in advance if I end up getting a little emotional. Although I have a script to guide me word by word, it is still painful to remember certain parts of the story. Now, my propensity toward limerence began when I was about 5 years old. I had crushes on a couple of boys in my pre-kindergarten class and moved on from both of them pretty quickly. But on the first day of kindergarten, it was love at first sight when I saw a boy with the most beautiful face I'd ever seen. I befriended him, and he became my #1 best friend. We stayed close all the way through high school, and though we have grown apart since then, he will always be one of my favorite friends. After my parents divorced when I was in 4th grade, I ended up sort of breaking up with my friend too. He was never really my boyfriend, but I nominally stopped loving him, and we proceeded mutually as only friends. I came to like another boy who was attending my school for the first time that year. He was a major crush I liked for 2 years. However, my feelings for him were not nearly as strong as those I had harbored for my friend. That, combined with my lack of success with my crush, and my crush's departure from the school, led to the end of the crush. In 2003, I finally realized I had never really stopped loving my friend. That boy was the love of my life, but he never felt the same way about me. In fact, during one of our frequent phone calls, when we were both 13 years old, he confessed to me that he was not only not Christian, but that he was also gay. That forced me to move on once and for all due to differing core convictions. But by that time, I was so accustomed to pursuing a romantic partner that I felt very sad and discontent during the next year or so when I did not have a major love interest to pursue. By the start of my freshman year of high school, the fall of 2004, I had planned to pursue a certain boy in my class who actually probably would have been a good match for me. But that was stopped in its tracks with another boy who has a personality similar to my friend, my longtime friend, unexpectedly displayed some common courtesy one day. "I'll be out of your way in a minute," he told me when I approached my locker, which was almost right next to his. It was a simple thing that would have been forgotten easily by most, but in that moment, all the hope I had for being with my one true love was transferred to him. And thus began my most life-disrupting episode of limerence. For the next 2.5 to 3 years, I obsessed over him. I was strategizing to be near him, fantasizing about being with him, really using thoughts about being with him as my motivation for going on with daily aspects of my life. You know, things like playing my flute or playing in the soccer game. Everything in my life was motivated by the hope that I would be with him someday. But of course, he never felt the same way about me either. You know, like my friend, he never felt the same way about me. So I so I have this note about the candygram in 2006. It was So my school had an annual candygram giving day, basically for Valentine's Day. And so I decided to anonymously give my limerence object a candygram. However, by that time he pretty much already knew that I had feelings for him. So he came up to me and told me thank you. Well, first he asked me if I had given it to him, and then he said thank you. And when he said thank you, apparently I had a hallucination that made me think he said I love you, which made me the happiest I have ever been in my life. I was absolutely beaming for the next several weeks until a few months later, because nothing else happened in our relationship, nothing progressed. I began to be suspicious that he had actually said that. So I wrote a note to him to get clarification on whether or not he had actually said it. And he wrote back, the first time he had ever written back to me out of multiple notes I had written to him. And he said, "It's unfortunate you think I said I love you because all I said was thank you." And that was the most that was the most painful thing I had ever read in my life. I kind of spiraled into depression, to desperation, and if I had not had my faith to keep me going, if I'd not had my faith to keep me going, to keep me alive, I might not even be able to give this presentation today. Well, I definitely wouldn't be able to give this presentation today, but I might not even be around today. So it was the most difficult thing that I've ever had to do to get past that. But within a couple of years, I mean, it was the hardest 2 years of my life between then and the summer of 2008 when I finally became free. And there's obviously a lot to the story that's being left out, but suffice it to say that God gave me strength and I'm finally free as of the summer of 2008. So all praise to him for getting me through that. After college, during which I had a mutual love relationship with a boyfriend I thought I was going to marry, I attended the spring concert at my high school. My limerence object was there, watching his little sister perform for the last time before her own graduation. We ended up having a fling, which brought back some of the feelings of limerence, but because I had been freed from it almost 5 years before, I was able to let go much more easily. Later that year, I married a man I met on a Christian dating site, and I have had little contact with my limerence object. Eventually, I would like to have a normal friendship with him, but I don't feel like I need it to be content. I'm very blessed. In 2019, we were expecting a daughter, but sadly she died before she was born due to a complex heart defect. In the quiet moments of grief following her stillbirth, I reminisced deeply about my experience with limerence, or as I knew it at the time, unrequited love, because I had not yet heard of the term limerence. My daughter's death had opened the door to finally pursuing fuller healing, from limerence, which was the most difficult experience of my life. Once I discovered the term, I read about it for hours and felt completely validated that what I had experienced had a name. Before, it felt like no one could really relate to my experience, but now I knew there were others, so I started to read their posts on the online forum. Because I couldn't find anything from a Christian perspective, I felt called to write a book to help others who are suffering from limerence. The book was going to be titled something like Lord Over Limerence. That book has yet to be written, but the calling led to the vision for a holistic ministry organization when I joined the limerence support group on Facebook and continued to find mostly secular and unhopeful perspectives. So I created a Twitter account to share short posts until I was ready to register a website domain and create a private community group for Christian limerence support. And in 2023, I was able to achieve much fuller healing as I wrote blog posts and shared them with anyone who decided to read them. Today, I am amazed at how far God has brought me since those dark days in high school, and I'm excited to see what He has next. While I, like any of us, am still a work in progress, I'm so thankful for all He has done for me and for using me to help others who have experienced the same kind of challenges I have. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining and sticking with me through this presentation and my story. I hope you have learned some things, and I will now open up the floor for questions. If there are no questions yet, but you think of some later, my contact information is on the screen, so please feel free to reach out as you think of them. Thank you very much again for joining, and have a wonderful rest of your day. So, are there any questions? Oh, thank you, Kristen. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll give about 30 more seconds for any questions that might come up. Otherwise, you'll get a copy of or a link to the recording, probably in about 4 hours. I think that's the setting, 4 hours. And again, thank you so much. I appreciate your interest. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you all.